Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the meeting of June 11th, and I saw, yes, to order. Our first order of business is roll call. All members are present, Linda. Thank you. And our next item is introduction of items by the superintendent, Mrs. Benton.
Good evening, everyone. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. They include the approval of the minutes of May 28th regular session, warrants G417, R223, payroll 6/4/2014, CB13, and SPED 25.
All right, thank you. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of May 28th and warrants G417 and R223. Oh, sorry.
So moved.
Oh, okay, so moved. Oh, that's what you were. Did you have a question?
I was going to say second.
Oh, second, okay. Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Our next warrant is the payroll warrant of 6/4. Could we have a motion to approve that? Mr. Mueller?
Motion to approve the payroll warrants of 6/4/2014.
Okay, in a second, Mrs. Bonish. All those in favor? 5 in favor and 2 abstain, Linda. Mrs. Carroll and Mrs. Kane. Warrant CB 13 and warrant SPED 25. Do we have a motion? Thank you. Do you have a second? Mrs. Carroll. Okay, all those in favor? 6 in favor and abstain. 1 abstain. Mrs. Burns. We did it at the end. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Benton. Superintendent's report.
5 items on the agenda. The first item is has to do with the changes in the school discipline law, Chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012, and I'd like to invite up Andrew Warr, our school attorney from Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, to present. And as he's walking
Yes,
out,
thank you, Mr. Warr.
since it's my last meeting, I'm just going to take the opportunity to acknowledge the work of Andy. I've worked with Andy for the past 10 years in Wilmington, and having come from another district, I was pleasantly surprised and pleased with who was appointed, who was the attorney in Wilmington, because he has been so accessible and responsive to all of our needs. Mm-hmm. He has always given us good advice, and I just want to acknowledge and thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And good evening, everybody. I was asked to come in and do sort of a brief overview of Chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012, not the least of which because it's going into effect on July 1st, 2014, just to make the school committee aware sort of in broad brush terms what's going to be happening. This is something that we did some professional development with the administrative staff back in March, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed. In a nutshell, there's a law that was passed in in August of 2012, which goes into effect on July 1st of 2014, which is going to change the manner in which you can discipline students in Massachusetts. Specifically, right now, as of today, students who are found in possession of drugs, weapons, or who assault an educator can be expelled under what's known as Chapter 71, Section 37H. If students are charged with a felony and the headmaster or principal determines that the student's continued presence would have a substantial detrimental effect on the general welfare of the student body, that student can be suspended indefinitely, and if convicted or pleading guilty to the felony, can be expelled. Under the new law, those provisions remain in effect, but there becomes an obligation on the part of the school district to provide educational services to those students, and that is a sea change from the current law today. So the first major change that I want to make you aware of is there's going to be a need to update handbook language to reflect the fact that there'll now be requirements to provide educational services to students who are out under those existing statutes, 37H and 37H and a half. The general theme behind the law is that the legislature was looking to try and provide alternatives to discipline before moving to discipline. So you'll see in the statute, and I've attached a provision or part of the statute, Section 37H and 3/4 at the back of the written materials. The intent behind the statute was to try and get school districts to look at alternatives to putting someone out of school based on data that they collected which showed that there was, from the legislature's perspective, excessive use of expulsion and statute and suspensions of students. So the legislative intent behind this is to try and provide alternative options to allow students to make educational progress during the terms of a suspension, to make up assignments if at all possible, and to earn credits so that they're not falling behind as a result of being out on discipline. If there are suspensions of more than 10 days, then there's an obligation on the part of the school district to provide a school-wide educational service plan, which is a list of options of ways to provide education to students, which includes online education, tutoring, and again, the goal there is to try and provide an ability of students to try and stay current with their class, notwithstanding the discipline that they may have received. Cost of the services, as I note in the materials, the legislature is currently debating funding a portion of those costs. It probably won't cover everything, so it may be viewed as an unfunded mandate. To date, I've not heard of any school districts that are looking at litigating the fact that it's an unfunded mandate, but it's a potential issue that's out there if the costs become excessive and burdensome. New students moving into Wilmington, you'd be responsible for. So if hypothetically they were disciplined in another school district and then move into Wilmington, you'd be obligated under those requirements effective July 1 to provide educational services, not necessarily in school, but through the options that I mentioned a moment ago, online courses, tutoring, and other types of creative educational components. So in terms of the ability to expel a student, that still exists. In terms of the ability to suspend a student for being charged with a felony, that still exists. The change will be an obligation to educate that student. The real change comes with the creation of a new subsection of Chapter 71, 37H and 3/4, and I've included that section of the law at the back of the materials that I gave you tonight. In a nutshell, 37H and 3/4 covers every kind of discipline that's not covered under the other two statutes. So, say hypothetically a student is found in possession of alcohol in school. It's not a violation of 37H. It may not be a felony, but it may be grounds for discipline. Say a student assaults another student, not to the level of a felony charge, but there's some sort of fight in school. Again, not a 37H and a half violation, not a violation of 37H. So you'd fall within this new statute, 37H and 3/4. 37H and 3/4 does a couple of things. One, it says that you can never expel a student for more than 90 days in a school year. Previously, there had never been a cap on the number of days that someone could be out under an expulsion or a suspension. And it also contains some pretty specific requirements procedurally for the school district to do before you move forward with some sort of suspension. Specifically, as I note in the materials, if you're looking at a suspension of 10 days or less, you need to send a letter to the family. It needs to be in the language of the family that they speak in the home. And there needs to be an opportunity to meet with the principal prior to the discipline going into effect. So right now, if someone is being suspended for fewer than 10 days, there's Supreme Court case law which says there's sort of minimal due process. You have to give them notice of what the allegations are, and they need to be given an opportunity to provide their side of the story. Under this new section, if your discipline falls within 37H and 3/4, that is, it's not one of the other two, it's more significant process, and this is only for an under 10-day suspension. And as we'll get to in a minute, the process gets even more significant if you're going over 10 days. So you need to make reasonable efforts to notify parents of the meeting, and then after the meeting, there needs to be some sort of memorialization of that meeting, whether it's in a letter or an email summarizing what happened in the meeting. So again, these are all new requirements that never were in existence before for what are viewed as sort of short-term discipline, fewer than 10 days, either individually or cumulatively. If you're looking at a suspension of more than 10 days, the procedural safeguards become even more significant. In addition to there being a letter, there are certain timelines that need to be met, and at the hearing, the family of the student, or the student, if the student is 18, has the right to bring legal counsel, the right to call witnesses, the right to present oral and written testimony, and significantly to cross-examine witnesses, which never existed in 37H and 37H and a half. Those hearings have always been viewed as relatively informal, so as not to make it unduly legal and become a hearing that only lawyers could understand. This format, I think, unfortunately, is probably going to make it more formal. It's going to require more lawyers involved in it, and significantly, I think the implication of having to call and cross-examine witnesses might mean that you might have to call more school department employees for a student discipline case, whereas right now, typically, the assistant principal will make an offer of proof to say, this is the evidence that we have. The statute seems to contemplate that you'd actually have to call someone as a witness to get that information or evidence in front of the decision maker, the principal. So those are sort of the highlights of the new law. As I said at the outset, it's going to require modification to your handbooks for the start of next school year. I'm not sure it's necessarily going to require any changes in policy right now, since you've got the statute, and the statute, I think, whether we like it or not, I think is relatively clear on its face. You have to follow that statute. There are regulations that the Department of Education has promulgated in the last 2 months that sort of fill in some of the gaps on the law, although many of the regulations, from what I can tell, sort of restate the law. They're not necessarily giving a lot of guidance, but there are regulations out there. So I think this new law, with its various components, is going to require an adjustment by school districts, in particular the administration, as they go forward on discipline, whereas in the past, shorter discipline required relatively little process. Now, if you're looking at putting someone out, it's going to be more process. And I think one of the things that this is going to do, it's going to, from what I can tell, 2 major developments. One is, if the discipline is in school, a lot of this process doesn't apply. So it's certainly going to encourage administrators to look at some sort of an in-school suspension as opposed to putting a kid out. That's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that it allows students to make progress, but it will require some sort of accommodations to be made by the district to know, if you've got 5 students who are on suspensions and they're in school, where are you going to put them? How are you going to allow them to make progress? That's all going to have to be thought out. So that's I think, one significant component to this. And then the second piece is, I think it's going to make administrators think twice before issuing discipline. I mean, I think that's a necessary, or at least my read of the statute. If given a choice of requiring all kinds of process or not disciplining students, I think sometimes administrators may look at it and say, I'm not sure I want to go through this. I'm not saying that that's necessarily always the best outcome here, but I think it's a natural reaction to that. So I think, there's going to need to be continued training for the administration to make sure they're comfortable with the process involved, so that they can feel comfortable going forward and have the support of everyone involved if they're going to move forward on discipline. I've included other materials here that talk about some of the other components of the new law. I'm not going to get into them tonight because you can look at them at your leisure, but I just wanted to sort of highlight what I see as sort of the big changes to the law, just so that if you hear from the new superintendent, if you hear from your administrators, oh, this new law is doing this, it's doing that, at least you'll have a little bit of an overview of what the law is contemplating, and hopefully these materials are helpful in terms of your understanding of the law going forward into the next school year.
Does anyone have any questions? Mrs. Barnes?
Now, when you're talking about the hearing piece, it's all before the superintendent, yes?
It would be before the principal in the first instance. There are appeal rights,
Yep.
Which I didn't get into here, that are in the materials that actually allow an appeal to the superintendent after you've
After
gone
it's
through that
exhausted.
process with the principal.
I see, okay.
Manny?
Are we talking about cross-examining witnesses? Are we just talking about teachers, or are we talking about students as well, that could be the victim of, harassment or whatever it was that
Yep.
caused
Yep,
suspension?
no, it's a great question. The hypothetical that I cited, a student comes to school under the influence of alcohol, or a student hits or assaults another student, and the district is looking at, let's stick with the assault for a minute. Doesn't rise to the level of a felony charge, but it's sufficient that it warrants discipline, and the district wants to discipline that student. They're going to need witnesses as to what happened, and it's, the victim is probably going to be one of those witnesses. So you might have a situation where the victim is going to have to provide testimony in a hearing like that, which is unfortunate because, you know, it raises the specter of that victim being victimized a second time in cross-examination, which I don't think, you know, is really the intent of that, but, you know, that's certainly an implication. I think as the law plays out, I think there's going to be further guidance from the Department of Ed. You know, I'm hopeful that they'll take a more big picture view of this and allow administrators to sort of summarize the evidence without necessarily having to call in students. That's one thing that we can do under the law right now, is not have to call in students. I think it's a real advantage. You don't necessarily want to call in students on a discipline case if you can avoid it, but it may be unavoidable.
Thanks, Andy.
So if that is the case and the victim could become a witness, do they have the right to refuse to testify? Would they have that right?
Yeah, no, another good question. The law doesn't speak to that, and the regs don't speak to that. So I suspect, but I don't know, that what you'll probably hear from the attorney for the family of the student who's being charged with the discipline, that, you know, that they can't meaningfully make a defense if they're not allowed to cross-examine the victim. You know, and so then it will come to the principal as to whether the principal wants to go forward without that person's testimony and take the risk that their discipline could be overturned at some point, or whether they're going to require the student to attend and testify. But again, we're sort of in that lead up to this law, and we haven't gotten guidance on that level of specificity, but it's a great question because it'll be an issue that every school district is going to wrestle with.
I have a question for Joanne. Do we have numbers of how many students have been expelled from Wilmington in the past 2-3 years?
I actually presented those to Julia a few days ago. She has the numbers.
The formatting got a little strange on my email, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like we have students disciplined of 3,636 students. There's a percentage of 102?
No, 102 students.
102 students, thank you. And then it's 2.1, is that the in-school suspension?
Yes.
1.3 is out-of-school suspension. And then for permanent expulsion, 0, and removed to an alternate setting, 0?
0.
Is that correct?
So we
Okay.
haven't really had any.
Hasn't really,
We have not.
Okay. So
good.
far, so good.
So far, so good.
Mrs. Burns?
I had additional, I felt that this information included in our packet with regards to the 10-point checklist was extremely helpful. Where are we with that 10-point checklist, with what we, what it is in place and what we have to do to meet this law in preparing our district for?
The schools will have to put together an educational plan, a process for educational plans for students. The DESE did send us out a spreadsheet that's about this wide for school administrators to record all the incidents that as a model, but superintendent-elect will have to work with the administrators in Andy on thinking up educational plans.
In training?
In training.
Okay.
I will tell you this, as you know, I chaired the SEAM board this year. That's something that I asked Kathy Lawson, the executive director, to look at, is providing an alternative place for programs for some students that we really would feel uncomfortable bringing back into the high school that could get virtual education in another setting. So she is putting that together for the SEAM districts.
Okay, would that be like an out-of-district placement piece, or would that,
No,
was that at-home virtual learning?
Instead of at home, it would be, they could be going, we have some programs in schools. They could say we go over to the BB school in Stoneham, and there's a classroom with an adult in there, it's online learning.
Okay.
But there's not in the general population.
Okay.
So I just had one question about the 90 days. So is that under no circumstances a student can be expelled?
Under 37H and 3/4, the cap is now 90 days.
Okay.
Yep.
So The traditional expelling a student as we know it is off the table now.
You could still expel under 37H. You're going to need to provide services to them. So the distinction is, in the past, when someone was expelled,
Yeah.
not only did you not have to provide services,
Yeah.
assuming they weren't a special ed student, but no other district in Massachusetts did. And now, moving forward, you can expel, so you can still do that. So if they're a danger, or if they've assaulted, or they've brought weapons, you can do that, but you're going to be on the hook for providing educational services.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood
And that's the
fully.
type of student I was referring to.
So that'll
If-
drive up cost of education. That'll be an additional, I'm assuming unfunded piece that we have to consider
You know,
because.
that's a great point, because I noted briefly I don't know, I'm sure you've heard about this. They did a study. They love to do studies at the state level, and they came up with a cost for the entire state, which was like $320,000 for all of the services to educate all of the students under this new law. To me, that number seems low. So I think one thing that I think would be really helpful is to track like a laser what your student numbers are going to be. You're going to have to do that under the law anyway, but also the cost associated with that, because it may be that if these costs are wildly underestimated, that, you know, it gives you some ability to at least go to the legislature. If not, you know, again, you know, it's the whole unfunded mandate issue, and at some point, some school district is going to say enough and take it to court. Nobody's done that yet, but that's a possibility. But I think the more practical effect could be, you know, you could go to your state representatives and say, you know, they're saying the cost was X and it's 5X or 6X, and, you know, we need some help on this.
If they have, if the students or their parents don't like the plan that the school system has come up with, do they have the right to refuse it and ask for a new plan?
Yeah.
Yep, they do.
You have to provide the educational services, so it contemplates multiple options, not just one. So, you know, the example that was given a moment ago was virtual high school or virtual education. That's certainly an option. It'll probably be a popular option, but you probably have to provide other options as well that the district's willing to provide, and they would, I think, have to, you know, work through that menu of options. So they can't reject everything and say, I want a specific option that's not listed by the district.
Okay. Any other questions?
And
Mrs. Benton?
I just wanted to add the other piece, which I think is going to be very time-consuming, and administrators are going to be swamped, and that's the student the new changes to the student absentee policy, because now, with this new law, if there's 5 unexcused absences, there has to be a meeting set up with the parents, but you have to give the parents 3 different dates to choose from, and then you have to find a time to meet with the parents to come up with a plan on how this is going to change, and that is going to take an awful lot of time for schools, especially schools that don't have assistant principals that they can delegate that job to. You're going to need to look at keeping that account of that as well. I mean, we already have the notification system K to 12, so we're in good shape there as far as notification when a student's out. But
Mrs. Burns?
Thank you. Won't that impact an already heavy load with regards to the new teacher evaluations and the collection of those data? I mean, how do you add one more task on it? I'm not sure where that burden, okay.
it is.
I understand.
Mr. Brewer?
If I understood correctly and I read correctly, a student can bring in legal representation, not just for expulsion, but for 10-day suspensions as well?
Right.
And I would assume if that's the case, we're not going to expect our...
I'm sorry, what I'd call the full-blown due process kicks in with more than 10 days, so.
More than 10 days,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But short of expulsion as well?
Correct, yes, yep.
If that's the case, I would assume our vice principal or principal is going to face legal representation without you being present, correct?
I mean, that's up to the district. I mean, historically, I don't think that's been the case. I mean,
Yeah, but-
typically, if there's a lawyer there representing a family, the district does not want to be
Right.
in a
So
meeting
that's
without
just, that's an
counsel.
additional cost as
Yes.
well?
Yeah, it will be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Mrs. Carroll?
And it says working permits are no longer excuse students from school, too. We should let the parents and the students know that, too.
That's
Just
the
in
other piece,
case.
I think a lot of education of the community needs to happen around this new law.
We don't have smiles on our face tonight from
No,
this.
it's,
It's another,
it's fixing a problem that I think in a lot of districts didn't exist or doesn't exist.
right.
Which is not to say that it wasn't a problem in some districts, but in districts like Wilmington, I mean, based on the data, I don't think it was there, but, you know, that's the new law, and we have to abide by that and move forward, and you know, maybe we'll be gathering data for 10 years from now to try and amend this, but in the meantime, that's the law.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so
Okay,
much for coming.
thanks, everybody.
We
Nice to
appreciate
see you all.
your time.
Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Good night. Ooh, okay.
The next item on my agenda is, was one of my system goals, and I know that you didn't evaluate me this year, but I think you've seen my work on all the other goals, but the last goal was around communication. And so this evening, Neil is going to show you the new website that we will be introducing to the community for the district and for the high school, and then the following year, for the rest of the schools. We've been working with Sterling Technologies, and I'm going to let him show you.
All right. Quickly. All right. So, where's that EDU? What do I do with it? All right, I'm just gonna go quickly over current site here. So, in the old website, one of the problems we were having was that there's too much information on the pages. It's too cluttered. People get kind of overwhelmed. It was kind of difficult to find things and navigate through it. I know that one of the key things that you guys had a issue with was the calendar, making sure you found all the calendar events kind of in one place. They're kind of scattered around. Currently, there are all sorts of breakout sites for different departments, and so you leave the main site and it looks different, and the navigation is different. We wanted to consolidate all that. I had previous to 6 months ago, I hadn't really had anything to do with the website, so I got pulled in. So we worked with Sterling. Oh no! So I shut one off, but I didn't shut the other one off. So we worked with Sterling Technologies to build this website. This is the new website. It's kind of squished in just because of the aspect ratio of the screen here, but as you can see, it's much cleaner. Is that Sterling? No. So it's much cleaner. There's a banner at the top that scrolls through all of our pictures, different things the district you can see. There's, well, here, I'll get into it. So on the left, we have this quick bar navigation on the left, Aspen login, that's for the parent login for the family portal. Calendar you can get to from several different places. New students, staff directory, and library, that's kind of online media. Now you can see at the top here, we have this navigation bar that brings you to, oh, my screen's. I can't really see. It's hard with this.
You should only have to go make 3 clicks to get.
Yeah, we tried to make everything.
That was one of the goals, so that we're not 9 different places. And the calendar goal, and I'm going to publicly acknowledge Christine D'Ambrosio, because she made the suggestion that she had 3 children in 3 different schools and had a look at 3 different sites to find out what was going on. Now, anyone will be able to click on the schools and then get a calendar that shows the activities just for the schools that their children are in. So that'll help a lot.
So it's kind of hard to see on this when you're not right in front of it, but there are all sorts of district links, central office, emergency procedures. There we go. Then we have schools. You just click on to go to any one of the schools. We only worked on the district site, like Joanne said, in the high school site for right now. Resources.
Can you go to the high school site?
Yeah.
Just to show them the...
Well, actually, I'm gonna, yeah, hold on one second. Then we have news and calendar. So from the general district site here, it's hard to keep zooming in and out. So we have this bar here too, which is welcome, just kind of is a message from the superintendent. Then social media, calendar, and latest news. So this is basically tweets, Twitter feeds, the calendar and latest news, just general posts that we can do from the website now. This is all from WPSK12.com. That's going to be our new website. So let me bring you to the calendar. So you can get a calendar within here, but just so you can see it better, I'm going to go over to this link. So by default, right now, it's going to show all of the different buildings. We're going to rename this. This calendar is actually going to change. We're making some updates even as we speak here. So what will happen is on the top, you'll have each of these calendars in a checkbox with the color of each calendar, so you know what each one is. But what you'll be able to do is select, say your child is in the Boutwell school, and you only want to see Boutwell. You can apply the filters and just see the Boutwell things. You can click on one and get the one informational event. You can do.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's Boutwell, and Boutwell's the yellow in the district. So a lot of these right now are all ones that are all district, but these are going to be breaking out into the different colors of the different schools. So while we're transitioning, say here's Shawsheen. Here's the Shawsheen events. So it's so much easier. We're actually adding a CARES, professional development, and Woburn Street's on it. And athletics. Athletics is already on there. So we'll have CARES and professional development, additional calendars on here.
Yeah, the athletics had a different website, and now it'll be integrated.
Yeah, they're updating it now, exactly. So you can look by week, by day, just by the event. You can scroll through the events.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah.
Much better.
much my life is going to be easier now.
It's pretty fantastic, and it's going to be even better. So with the key at the top, so you can see what each color is for.
So all athletic events will be on there?
All athletic events should be on there. You can see them all next to all the other events in the district. School committee, athletics.
What color did we?
Which one am I going to do? They're random right now, but
We have to take a
yeah.
vote on that.
You guys get pink.
Green.
Oh, pink, right.
Yeah.
Steve is,
Yeah.
Mandy will love that.
Andy and I are thrilled.
I have 2 girls to pink all over my house.
So if we go to, let's go to about in district. Some of the navigation and all of the stuff on each page is very well laid out. We have different navigation for different kind of chunks, but as you can see here, we can do tables very easily like this with documents for information. They'll build themselves sometimes when we upload the documents. Let's see.
Neil, can I ask a question?
Yes.
For the school committee site, I'll record, you know how we've been posting our materials after the meetings? Will it look similar to what you're showing us?
So here's the school committee. So this is, yeah, I mean, we can change it and add it and do all sorts of stuff. Here's the video for May 28th.
Does
Also,
that cover the entire meeting, Neil?
I think so, yes,
Yes.
53 minutes.
Will that be on after every meeting?
Not necessarily, but we
If you
could.
want, if you choose to.
That's
Yeah.
a great idea, though.
I think that's a great idea.
My personal opinion.
Oh, before we had lists and lists and lists that you kind of had to pick through. So now we'll have like 2014, it's just a folder, and you can open the folder and then go through any one of the days to get the information that you want, instead of having to try to look through, lists and lists and lists. Steve York, see, we updated it already.
not everything.
Very nice.
No, I'm still vice chair.
One last thing I want to go through real quickly, because I know you want to wrap this up. We also have, in conjunction with this, we're building a new district app for Android and iPhone. Basically, it has probably 10 or 11 buttons. Each one does a certain thing. You can click through to say, we'll set it up to, like, you can find your students, your child's teacher, and then it'll populate with the email. You can click on the email, open your email application so you can email the teacher. There are tools on there for students to report bullying, anonymous reporting. It goes straight back to the superintendent, or however you set that up. There are ways to do pushes, so on your phones, at the top, and you scroll, you have like little icons at the top that maybe there's like an informational thing. This will push out informational events, so you'll see them on your phone. There's a connection to go to the parent portal in Aspen. There's so many things in it, but I'll give a preview of that soon. Probably the school committee in the fall. And the last thing I wanted to show you about this, speaking of
When will this be ready?
this is going to launch this week or next week. We're just about ready to launch it.
And second part of that question, are we going to send a reverse call to the parents saying that we have a new website, or?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll
We
do
thought about that?
lots of information
The,
around it.
It's just the district page right now and the high school page, and then next year, the principals need to get trained at the elementary level. Another good thing about this is anybody who has a code can go in and make changes. One of the other problems with our website is I felt that the news sometimes was static, or there was a lot of old news on the web page. Now it can come off quickly, and you can get the information that you need. It took longer than we thought, but I think it was well worth it, because we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we responded to the needs of the community. It was accessible and easy, and a quick way of finding information about the schools. So I'm really excited for all of you about it. I think it's going to be a wonderful tool for all of you. And the calendar piece, especially when we have a school system with so many different buildings, it'll make it so much easier for parents and guardians to get information. And the app is just a great additional tool for parents.
Is it a free app, or?
Yes.
Yes.
So there's 30% now of people who browse the internet do it on a tablet or a mobile device, right? And that's increasing. So it might be more than 30 at this point. But and that's the reason we wanted to make sure that this website was also very mobile ready. So what I was just zoomed in here to kind of approximate what it would be on a tablet or a phone. What happens is when you get in this close, when it shrinks it down to a tablet size, you get this little navigation button right here that pops up at the top. So you click on that, and then you just get the navigation this way. And then you can get out of the navigation. At the top here, you get this breadcrumb. When you scroll through, everything is kind of in one column and easy to see. Bigger font. That's a PDF viewer. And then you get all the links at the bottom. So it makes everything that much easier. There you go. So we're ready.
That's great.
All right.
Good
wraps it
job.
up.
Thank
you.
you.
Very
you.
good.
Anyone else have any more questions? That was excellent. My favorite things. Electronic devices. Excellent. Very nice.
So, something to look forward to.
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Also, under the superintendent's report, you have a report on data and assessment that Dr. Burnham prepared on all the work around data this year. Report on curriculum staff development for this year. And lastly, the SEAM FY15 approved budget. That's under change in the collaborative laws. Now, budgets need to be presented, given to school committees, local school committees that belong. So that's why that is in your packet.
Oh, from the same,
Yes.
Great. Did anyone have any questions on any of those reports? Dr. Burnham, I would just say 1 hour's reading at least. I think at 1 hour I got tired. Excellent. This is such a good review of what everyone's done in the system. And if people say that the teachers are not working hard and the people directing them are not working hard, there's something wrong. Because this piece of information is really impressive.
I always appreciate the detail and clarification within the report itself, which it's, the hours behind it is apparent. Thank you very much for.
And I think also for the data, our data person, the data was very, finally, I'm really understanding how you're using the data and why it's important to gather it. And this was an excellent report as well. Yeah.
I would suggest in the fall, you may want to invite Jen White to a school committee meeting to do a presentation. I think that was one of the best hires you ever made in proving a data specialist for the system. She has educated us all, really helped everyone understand what the true use of data is, and the teachers have been really, really enjoying working with her, so.
That's a good suggestion,
find.
thank you.
Neil and Kate found her.
Yeah, oh, good. Good work. All right, thank you. Now we're on to new business.
So I'd like to invite up Superintendent-elect Mary DeLye and Neil Ellis to the table. Neil, Kate, Mary, and I met last week to discuss this. As you know, the state is deciding on what kind of test we will be administering in the next 2 years, and this year gave us the option of, well, they didn't give us the option, we were told, we were selected to pilot PARC. PARC is a new assessment that could be replacing MCAS down the road, and we were able to test out online with some of our students and paper version with some of our students. And the DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, is giving local school communities the option for the 2014 through 2015 school district as to what they would like to administer, either PARC or MCAS. In order to make a decision, the four of us met and reviewed the results of the survey that we gave the teachers that administered the test. We looked at the history of what we were trying to accomplish in Wilmington and what would be a benefit to, what would benefit our students the most. Currently in Wilmington, MCAS plays a critical role in our data collection. We're using it as part of the new educator evaluation system. It's a proven test. It's been around for a while, and the results have been helpful to us. In addition, it is part of the law right now, MCAS. The benefit of going with PARC would be that it would allow the school community to be held harmless. My personal opinion, it holds you hostage. I mean, you're not getting a growth rating for the year, but to me, that's going to hurt Wilmington in that you are moving forward with a plan in place about increasing student achievement, and if you have a whole year of held harmless, it's not going to help everybody as far as moving students forward. Secondly, we do not know if the state is going to choose PARC, if the Board of Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Ed is going to choose PARC, and Lastly, we don't have the technology to administer online to all of the students 3 through 8. We could opt for a paper pencil version of the park, but to me, I think it's in your best interest to move forward with MCAS for the 2014-2015 school year. And I just want to clarify something. Tom Scott, the executive director of the MASS, sent out an email late this afternoon, which sort of said, "Don't shoot the messenger." But there was some misunderstandings around whether school committees could change their mind after June 30th and revisit this topic before October 1st for a final version. That is not the case. The decisions have to be made by June 30th, and I have to go online and record what the decision is. So we have a lot of experts here if you have questions. And
Mrs. Burns?
Thank you. June 30th is the cutoff date for a confirmation if we do decide to go with Park. It's a guarantee. Anything after June 30th, it's up in the air because it's actually, the park next year is actually, I believe, state-funded. Please correct me because I'm still kind of crunching on it all. It's up in the air as to whether or not they'll be able to fund you in the park. So you might be stuck with MCAS. Anyway, but it's guaranteed if you make that decision before June 30th. If I could just go into...
Can I just say one thing? I just want to clarify that the decision is for grades 3 through 8. 10th graders will still need to take MCAS. And if you were to go with Park 3 to 8, the grades that take science would still have to take the MCAS science piece. So,
Plus, the other part of that is they have to take the MCAS in grade 10 and pass it in order to graduate. That has not changed.
right. Okay.
So, Mrs. Burns.
I'm hoping that a lot of you have been on the MASC web server because it's really being blown out of the water with discussion with regards to the decisions that school committees are now having to make with regards to how we proceed. I attended the PAC versus MCAS seminar last week. Bob Bickerton of the DESE hosted it. I have to say, did find some more contradictions, although it was a little more streamlined than my visit with him and the commissioner in February. My basic assessment, I pretty much agree with Patty Nolan. She's the Cambridge School Committee member that Peggy had forwarded her response on it. I have to say that the seminar itself was pretty accurate in my interpretation as well. From what I see is that if we were to go with Park, I mean, when are we going to make that transition piece? Students are the ones who are going to really take the hit because although districts will be held harmless, which means our level will not, we cannot go down in level, we can only go up if we choose Park. The student assessment and their scores are still count because the federal government still requires the student scores. So are those student scores accurate? They're probably not going to be accurate if going into Park. You know, and that's all well and fine if it's talked about the transitional. My aspect is, and I spoke to Mike Gilbert further on this today, because I wanted to get a pulse as to where the State House sits with all of this. Basically, they feel it's between the local governments and the Board of Education at this point, and they're not going to get involved until it becomes a funding issue, which is a whole other animal. In talking with Mike, I did ask him, I said, you know, hypothetically, I think I'd feel more comfortable going into MCAS next year with knowing we'd have an additional pilot year after that, so we'd have results to compare with. Pearson has the opportunity to tweak out some of the issues with Park that we faced this year, and then in that second year of pilot, I should say third year of piloting at that point, then we'd have a little better, it'd be a little easier transition for both, not just our students, but our staff and administrators and leaders in executing it. It's going to be a transition. We're going to take a hit. My only concern is that it'll be like a race to the top piece where if we don't buy into it now, then that hold harmless piece is not going to continue. But Mike seems to assure me that it's probable that that might be a possible decision at the end of next year's, once those results are viable, because with the change of the governorship and the possible leadership at the state level, and because once they vote on Park, I think, he said it's almost for certain that school districts will have 24 months to get the technology into their schools. So you're talking about major funding. So he said it would only behoove Pearson to put it out another year. So in weighing out which option do we get, do we take the hit now or do we take the hit later? But when I say hit, I think the students are the ones who are going to be the ones compromised. And I kind of have to, because I've been debating it after talking to Mike, I think giving it another year and keeping my fingers crossed and rolling the dice, and I would rather get another year under our belts, especially because this has been our first year of the teacher evaluations, especially, which Mike felt too that the state would probably hold those harmless as well if we did go to Park. But I have not heard from that, so I can't buy into it right now. I do feel more safer in revisiting it this time next year. But I don't feel that changing to Park for next year is, personally speaking, I think MCAS, I think I would rather see our students, I don't want to see our students take the hit, personally. And I think another year, especially to help out our district determined measures and the teacher evaluations, is a reasonable choice, in my opinion, if that makes sense. So I was looking here, I'm all over the board.
Could I just ask a question of Neil? When the kids were taking it, especially the younger ones, was there special preparation needed to show them how to answer the test questions, or was it pretty straightforward? How did they do that?
Our integration specialist at the elementary did work with teachers to bring the kids into the lab and go through a practice test that Park had set up for that purpose. Those kids that did that with the integration specialist, they were definitely well prepared to take the exam. But that said, the exam itself is a much different exam than the MCAS. So it's a much more, it's much less focused on rote memorization and more it makes you think and makes the kids think. And the kids actually liked taking it on the computers instead of on paper. They prefer it that way. But there were some technical glitches, and I'm not sure if that.
Are they allowed to, if you had a technical glitch, is the teacher allowed to come over and help you as part of this test? Because you know how in some tests you can't go near the kids when they take
Sure.
it; they have to just do it.
Sure. No, we were able to. It's very from my team. It was very tech intensive. We had to do a lot of tech support for the exam. There were at least 2 technicians in the room, as well as the teacher, and most of the time the principal, to kind of smooth things out as there were glitches. And we could work with the student and just say, okay, hold on one second, we'll figure this out. And we'd click around and get it back working, and that went in waves depending on how close it was to the end of the cycle of when you could submit the test. But yeah, you could help them.
Mr. Mullis?
Is there any feedback on any other districts that had technical glitches and what they're doing about it for next year? Or
There's no, I guess there's no official feedback as of yet. There's feedback that I've seen through, my peers in other districts, and there was a lot of stuff buzzing about that. There were definitely issues. The looked like the best device that didn't have any issues and seemed to have a kind of a seamless experience for the student was a Chromebook, the Google Chromebook. That was pretty much the outcome. Everything else was, I had this problem, I had that problem. There were, internet speed connection problems. You had to set up a server to cache it. We had issues just preparing the computer to be able to lock it out the test from anything else, so the student couldn't get into anything else on the computer. That was a lot of work. We spent a lot of time doing that. In the preparation for doing one of those, we took down 2 labs accidentally, and we had to get that back up and running. But I think it would go more smoothly another round. And I think it would take less tech support. But
I will say this, in the state presentations, that they have not reported on the technical piece the way they should be.
They're very rosy about it,
They're hiding it right now. Because, I mean, we saw it as we were doing the listservs were going crazy every day about what was going on, because everyone was having the same problems, and frankly, in my opinion, Pearson was not ready to roll it out, and they did it too soon, and we paid for it. I mean, Dale was on the phone one day, and I was overhearing him. I was standing in the room, and he's telling the guy something that they should have known they hadn't done. So it was just craziness as far as them being ready for us. As we went along, it got much easier, and I think they, learned a few things. But that's a great question, and it'll be interesting to see what the results.
Mrs. Carroll?
We don't have any data on how our kids did, how our district did on it.
We
right?
won't get
We
any.
won't get
Didn't,
that.
no.
I don't know how,
Do you have it, Mrs. Burns?
I would have liked to see.
Two other points that I wanted to mention, that this year's Springs test was, the pilot was on the content of the questions asked, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we're not seeing results of that testing. And the other aspect that, to add to what Superintendent Benton stated, was the MCAS, 10th grader MCAS will be in effect till 2018. They haven't created the science aspect, as she noted, but the other aspect is they haven't created a PARC alt test for those students who are unable to do the testing online. And off of that, although they have developed accommodation plan for the PARC piece for students with disabilities, they run in the same gamut that the MCAS accommodation for these students didn't really meet a lot of these students' accommodations with regards to how they learn and how they can perform what they know. And this runs a larger risk at this point. I really do think, though, maybe another year and having them tweak, whether it be the questions, the technology, giving that another year for Pearson to kind of work out some of the bugs. It won't be all of it worked out, but some of it, I think, would put us in a better light going into it in the following year. Granted, as I said, I think it's going to be a risk not knowing what the state will allow for, but I think it'd be a smoother transition for us as a district in going forth with PARC. PARC is coming. This idea as to whether they're going to revisit MCAS, that's a load of malarkey, because the amount of money and time that it would take to bring MCAS up to technology, to the Common Core standards, they've just dumped millions and millions and millions of dollars into PARC. There's no way they're going to invest in the state's going to have them invest another millions of dollars in revamping MCAS to meet the need. It's just a matter of when,
I just wanted to add one thing, then, Mrs. Carroll. This is my notebook so far on PARC of all the things that have been said about it on the listserv, and the information we're getting. And not one of these pieces is there anyone saying that we should go with the PARC. I can't believe it. There's just no reason. They're not giving any reasons other than the fact that we're going to have it shoved at us. But they're not talking about why we should have it. So I'll just leave that. But this has been the reading that we're all basically doing. Mrs.
They're not
Carroll.
giving us anything like any funding.
No.
If you go with it first, I'll give you. They're not doing that, right? Like
Right.
Race to Nowhere, we were going to get funded.
the carrot is the hold harmless piece. That's the carrot in
All
this,
right.
what's.
So they're not going to give us anything if we
So
go.
you had mentioned something about funding if we decide before June 30th. What funding were you talking about?
In order, Joe might be back, do you want to explain?
They don't have enough money to, if, say, the whole state wanted to go PARC, they don't have enough money to afford that.
For everyone to do the
For
test.
everyone to do the test, so,
So they're hoping some,
yes. They know some are going to do MCAS, so they're hoping that.
And the aspect of that, too, if I could add to that piece, is that the results of next year's testing, they're going to compare districts who take MCAS to districts who take PARC. And when I asked Bob Bickerton, well, are you going to break that down to similar demographics of districts who take MCAS and PARC? He said no. So hypothetically speaking, what will probably happen is, and I say hypothetically, that if you have a district like New Bedford taking MCAS, you compare it to a Weston who's taken PARC, how is that comparative results? I just, in order to build this system and make it better and more people to buy into it, I don't know how they're going to just roll it up in a percentage. is what they're going to do, and
The other piece for the funding, I mean, they're talking about putting in money for infrastructure. Our problem is, we really need the tools, because this is one case where Wilmington really loses out in the fact of the way we are structured, because most schools are K to 5. So there's 2 5th grades, 2 4th grades. You can easily administer in a lab with that, that way. But the way we're structured, with 7 4th grades and 7 5th grades in a building, what they are saying is you need half the number of student tools in order to administer it. So that,
Ratio 2 to 1, right?
yeah.
If there was one building, you could get a bunch of carts and move
Right.
them all over.
Yeah.
I just want to see if Mr. Lau wants to, still, did you want to add to anything? Do you wanna-
No, just to thank Superintendent Benton and her team for allowing me the opportunity to participate in the discussion, that obviously inherit this decision, but to participate in the decision as well. I think in general, it's very much a district-based decision that has to be made, and while we may see districts around us going a different direction, it was very clear to me from what the team was saying that this was the best decision for Wilmington Public Schools, and so I certainly support and agree with the recommendation and satisfied with the decision.
Oh, thank you.
Just
Thank you.
for a reference, it's interesting, and I was surprised, Linfield, Lexington, Cambridge are all going with MCAS, which
Yeah,
was
they are.
a change from what we were hearing about a month ago. So I think you're going to see an equal divide. I was just at the Merrimack Valley Superintendent's meeting earlier this evening, and it was right down the middle. There were 10 superintendents there, 5 was MCAS, 5 was PARC. So I think it's going to be an interesting
The ones with Park are not writing in at all. In the last couple of days, they're all MCAS.
change or changing.
The school committees are writing in and saying, Wilmington is doing this, and they're all MCAS so far. Mrs. Burns, do you have more?
Yeah, I have a question for Superintendent Benton. Any feedback as to how Burlington fared in this pilot?
They did okay, but they had, issues. They also agreed, right, the Chromebooks were the best, Neil?
Yeah, I don't know if they have Chromebooks and they have iPads. I don't know which ones they said that were the easiest. From everything I heard, it was the Chromebooks from most of the districts that had them, but
There were some issues, but they were determined to make it work. And
work, yeah.
it'll be interesting to see. There's some regulations that if you have an iPad, that students had to have a keyboard. Well, most of the students who have iPads at home and are used to them don't use a keyboard and actually put them aside and unplug them and just use the iPad as is, but that was a requirement of Pearson. The headphones was another requirement, so it'll be interesting to see, but I think that we probably you should vote your decision so it's on record.
So are we ready to take a vote? All right. At the back of this page, I think is probably the best way. It says, we'd take a motion that the Wilmington Public Schools administer the MCAS assessment for grades 3 to 11 for the 2014-2015 school year. Mrs. Burns?
So moved?
Do we have a second? Mrs. Carroll? All those in favor? Unanimous, Linda. Thank you. I just want to say for people who are listening, we have done a lot of background on this to come to our conclusions, and I think all of us we've been doing a lot of reading, anything, and we'll just wish ourselves luck and see how it works out. Okay, thank you. Revolving account report.
So the last thing in your packet is thanks Mary, thanks Neil, is a revolving account report provided by Director of Administration and Finance, Paul Ruggiero. It's only posted through March 31st because we have to wait for the
Revenues.
Yeah,
The report shows, if I may, revenues through March 31st, expenses through May 30th. And the timing differential is basically the town has to reconcile bank statements, and once they do, they will post the revenue. So I wanted to get a report out to you now. I'll give you another report once everything's posted, sometime in the fall to wrap up this fiscal year. But
I think it's a little ironic that the last item on the agenda has to do with money. It's like, okay. Our next item is public comment. Public comment. And then we have other reports. I don't know, Mrs. Burns.
I'll keep this brief. I'm waiting to hear back. I have an appointment with Senator Tarr next Tuesday to discuss the park piece, and I'm waiting to hear from Representative Gordon, Ms. Sally's office, to discuss the funding piece. And Mike Gilbert also suggested opening a discussion with regards to the park alt, or the lack thereof, with this pilot piece. So I'll be starting that discussion. And in light of this week's recent incidences in Oregon, I don't know if you remember, soon after the Newtown shootings, I wrote a letter to Senator Warren and Congressman Tierney with regards to gun control and mental health, but our schools, and our schools running a threat of harm. And we're not set up to provide prison-like security. We're there to educate our students, yet now schools are, with each passing shooting, having to rethink and find other ways to make our schools secure from within as well from those on the outside coming in. So I would like to ask for your permission to write another letter, because I'm not doing enough, with regards, again, to Senator Warren and Congressman Tierney and state legislators regarding another school shooting and death. As you know, and it's been reported in the national news, 74 school shootings have taken place in this country in the past 18 months, and I think someone equated that to about a shooting a week. Lives are, and this is not including the shootings at naval bases and in the communities. I think granted, it might not promote action, but I think it's still warranted that our voices be heard, and I would like to do it collectively as a school committee. And since I probably won't complete this letter before our next, complete it before our next meeting, I was wondering if you would also allow me to have it, to run it by Peggy and whoever the sitting superintendent is at the time for approval to send without joint committee approval. And I'd be welcome anybody additional comments or thoughts on it too that I could build into the letter as well.
So everyone would see it before you sent it?
Yes, I could send it all out, but because we can't vote outside of public meeting, it would be just for informational purposes, and if you would allow me to, defer Peggy and the superintendent to okay it.
Yes.
How do you feel?
Is there anything additional I could?
Mrs. Carroll? No. Oh, you were saying aye. Oh, sorry. Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so I'll get working on it then.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a
Mrs.
question.
Carroll.
Have we sent a letter to the Oregon schools saying we're sorry for what happened? We did that on Sandy Hook.
Yes, I did.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Everyone since Sandy Hook.
Yes,
I
yeah,
have.
thank you.
Wow, that's excellent. Thank you. Are there any other reports? I think our committees have wound down. We're all set. I will say that the other day, I know some of us were able to go to the authors, young authors, and it was our WEF group. WEF group? Part of our, is that a new president? It was our WEF group who made the author available, and I was really lucky to be able to talk to her personally for about 20 minutes in between her presentations, and she was fabulous. She was really worth the money. She did an excellent job, and we could not have had it without WEF's contribution to the school system. So we really appreciate that. To the Wilmington Educational Foundation, we really appreciate them. Okay, and now I think we have nothing. Oh, sorry, correspondence. No, okay, no correspondence. All right, before we end our meeting, we would like to say thank you to Mrs. Benton. I can't even begin to say what it has meant to have Mrs. Benton as our mentor, our leader, our visionary, our guide. We have some people who are formerly on the school committee here tonight coming to share a little cake with us after the meeting is over. And I can't go on. So I just want to say that, Mrs. Benton, a lifetime pass, this will be your favorite thing, a lifetime pass to Wilmington to go to the athletic events. And presented to Joanne Benton in appreciation of your dedicated service to the students of the Wilmington Public Schools, July 2014.
Thank you.
You must have one of these.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to take a minute because I feel like this is your life flashing by. I'm seeing all these people from the past and from the present, but I'm thrilled that our town manager is here so I can publicly thank him for the incredible collaboration and that I have experienced in this community the time I've been here, and he continued on in a tradition that Mike Kyra had around how we go about funding the schools. And this will be the last time that I say this. I've probably said it 20 times in the past 3 weeks, but I really, truly believe that this community is one of the best-kept secrets in Massachusetts. It's the only community that I know of that truly, truly celebrates and takes care of its elders and celebrates and takes care of its youth and does it in partnership, schools and towns. People know I came from Lexington, where I used to have to fight for the town, for the school budget on town meeting floor. It was be 8 nights of battle, and when I came to Wilmington, I was pleasantly surprised, and it's truly a model for the state on how good school-town relationships work. I want to thank Jeff, all the department heads. We truly have had a wonderful relationship. I look at the accomplishments of this town in the past 7 years, the adoption of full-day kindergarten, the new high school, which is about to open next February. One thing that we have truly done an outstanding job of, and it falls on what MJ was just talking about, but that is the adoption and training of all our staff on ALICE. Safety is truly one of the most important things any superintendent has to think about, and I am proud to have worked with the Wilmington Police Department, Fire Department, and all the administrators in implementing a program, writing our own curriculum, first in the state, and actually implementing it pre-K to 12. To have watched the drills in pre-K through 5th grade was something to see. All of our students took it seriously. It went off without a hitch, and they understand the need. And that's the sad part, that these days we have to continue to do that kind of training. Everything that I've done in Wilmington, it has not been me, it has been a team, and you're only as good as your team, and I've had an incredible team to work with, and that includes the school committee. I have been blessed over my past 7 years to work with incredibly talented, giving individuals who have sacrificed their time at home with their families because of their caring about the Wilmington Public Schools and the students in the schools. And I think that, you know, I need to applaud all of you because you have made some really wonderful changes to this community. I think back 10 years ago when we're looking at a rate of 64% of our high school students going on to post-secondary education. Now you have 96% of your students going on to post-secondary education, 2% going into the military, and I applaud them and we honor them. That is amazing. You had MCAS scores that were at 67 to 72% in the high school in math and English language arts. Now you have 97% and 96% in math and English language arts. That all happened because you as a community came together, worked with all of us, worked with our teachers, and provided the funds that they needed for professional development, provided a curriculum cycle for materials. You've heard us, you believed in us, and you've seen the results. And it is something I will never, ever forget, all the people that I've worked with in this community. So thank you all very much. Thank you.
With that, our future meeting is August 27th, unless something comes up, we can always call a meeting over the summer if we need to. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Carroll, and a second, Mrs. Burns. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.